Welcome to the Coding in the Wild podcast, where we explore the impact of computer science across various industries. This week, we'll be speaking with Feross, Aboukhadijeh, and talking about open source software. Welcome back to the episode 2 of the Coding in the Wild podcast, and I'm very excited for our conversation with Feross, who is an open source software extraordinaire and has so many various interesting programming projects. So definitely not enough time to cover even 1/100th of them, but excited to chat. So first, hello to Feross.
Hey, Jeremy. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So where are you calling in from?
Calling in from Stanford. I live right next to Stanford University.
Awesome. So I know you've worked on a bunch of different coding projects, companies, organizations. What are a couple of them that you've been excited about in the last few years?
So I spent a lot of time writing open source projects that I've started. So I've started a bunch of them over the years. Probably the two biggest ones are Webtorrent and Standard.js. Those are two projects that I started. The first one, Webtorrent, is a peer-to-peer application that lets you share files over the internet with people. And the second one, Standard, is a code style tool to help people write really good code.
Got it. Awesome. So are these both open source software?
Yeah, they're both open source.
Okay. So if I'm a student and I've never heard of open source software, what does that mean?
So open source is super cool. It's something that everybody uses, whether they know they're using it or not. It's a way of writing software where you work with other people, and you work with people from all over the world, people who work at companies or who are independent people, and you basically develop software in the open, meaning that all the source code is completely available online for free to view, and anyone who's interested can just show up and participate in writing this software together. And so some of the most popular software in the world is open source. So if you've ever heard of Linux or the Apache web server or the Chrome web browser, basically lots of the most important software that we use today is open source. And it's developed this way because it's just really a powerful way of working together with people. And the fact that anyone can just show up and look at the code means that if you're trying to learn how are these products built, then you can just show up and read the code, and you can see exactly every line of code that went into making, something like the Chrome web browser or Linux work. And that's just super exciting from a learning perspective, but also just it's crazy that all these companies just get together and do this and work together, and individuals can show up and everyone can just participate.
It's pretty different than everything else. I don't know if there are other a good analogs for open source software. It feels like it has a lot of unique elements, but how did you originally get involved in open source software?
After I finished college, I started a company. So I had an idea, and the idea was to connect everyone's web browsers together so that if one person is watching, say, a YouTube video and their computer has already downloaded that YouTube video, then another person who shows up later to watch that same video, they could fetch the video from you, since you already have it, instead of having to go and get it from YouTube. And the idea here was to make websites more resilient, to make them faster, and to make them cheaper for the operators to run. And so we had developed this whole product, and we were trying to sell it to companies. But then I realized that it would be really fun and it would be really powerful if I could create the same thing, but for just any files in general that, let's see, I'm not explaining this well. It's kind of abstract.
What was it called?
The company was called PureCDN. It ended up getting...
What's a CD? And I think I know. I mean, a CDN lets you download files, but is this you're making sort of a faster way to download files or a distributed way to download files?
Yeah, so companies they'll put their files onto these servers all around the world. They have servers in every single country, right? And why do they do that? Well, they do it because if a file is near you, literally like physically near you in a server that's in your city, then it's actually quicker to download it. Which is crazy when you first learn about it, because it's like the speed of light literally is the limiting factor in how fast you can get something, because your computer has to go all the way to that server, ask it for what it wants, and then get it back. So the companies literally need to have servers in every city to make their websites fast. But our idea was, why would we want to buy servers and install servers and pay for all of this space for servers, which is very expensive, and doing it all over the world when you can just use everyone's computers? We already have like computers all around the world. Everyone has a computer. Why don't we just use that and make a CDN? And so, yeah, that's pure CDN.
And then you sold the company to Yahoo, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And then I went and worked at big company, Yahoo, for a little while. And that was actually when I started doing open source. So when I went to Yahoo, I realized that some of the ideas of pure CDN were really good and should live on, even though, Yahoo now owned this technology. And so Webtorrent is sort of like the best ideas from pure CDN, but implemented so that anyone can use it without having to pay us, like completely open and free for everyone to use.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I know one thing I noticed when looking at some of the projects is the scale at which they're downloaded. So some of your projects are downloaded millions of times a month. Is that right? I don't know what the exact numbers are, but is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
How many times a month does someone use Webtorrent or standard JS?
So it's a little hard to get concrete numbers on some of these things, but Webtorrent is loaded over 30 million times in people's browsers every month. Our desktop application is installed on like around 2 or 3 million people's computers. And then the open source packages that compose Webtorrent and all of those are downloaded tens of millions of times. Those aren't just used by Webtorrent, but like they can be used in other projects by other people to building other things. And so it's really cool.
That's one thing I find so interesting about open source software that I don't think people realize is that, if you pull down the layers and you pull down the layers, that any project that you use is depending on tens, hundreds, I don't know, thousands. I don't know if it's thousands, but tons of open source software all the way. And so I think that's just crazy that the scale that they're used at. So how did you, if you remember, how did you originally learn to program? Like the first time, or when did you learn to program? Or have you always known?
Yeah, I was born knowing JavaScript. No, I originally learned in high school when I wanted to make a website for myself. So I don't know where I got the idea, like I should have a website when I was like 12 or 13. It must have been 13. I think I was a freshman, 13. I just Googled how to make a website and I started reading about HTML and CSS. And then later on, that finally led me to PHP, which is like my first real programming language was PHP.
Yeah. Awesome. What, with your projects and the work that you're doing today, are you using a lot of different programming languages or just a few, or what do you find that you're using today?
Mostly I use JavaScript because I realized earlier on that I was spending a lot of time every time I wanted to build something new. I was learning a new programming language and learning like a new framework, and it was slowing me down a lot. So I decided maybe, I guess 7 years ago, that I wanted to get good at one language and just be really proficient so that if I have an idea, I could make it happen and be kind of an expert in one area. So I chose JavaScript because it seemed like if you're going to pick one language, it's a really nice one to pick because it lets you do websites, it lets you do command line programs with Node.js, it lets you do server stuff. And so with one language, you can, they're even putting JavaScript on drones now. You can fly drones with JavaScript. You can make mobile apps like iPhone and Android apps with JavaScript using React Native. So there's really nothing that you can't do with JavaScript. So if you're going to learn one language, it felt like the one to learn. So
got it. I'm curious. So if I wanted to get involved in an open source project, or I'm a student and I wanted to get involved, it feels from the outside maybe a little intimidating. It's like everyone who's doing these projects, they know everything already. Is there like an easy entry point to open source software? Or if people are trying to learn about it, are there ways for people to get involved before, obviously there's different levels of complexity, but are there easy entry points into open source software?
So open source can be as easy as just taking some code that you wrote and putting it on GitHub. And then that's it. You've done open source. Like, that's it. And It's really easy. Yeah. I mean, okay, I took my code and I let everybody see it. That's open source. That's all it is. It's like you make some code and you put it out there. And if people like it, they'll look at it and they'll read it and they'll use it to build other things. They'll build on top of it. All it is sharing. Open source is just sharing. So that's one really easy way. But maybe that's kind of a cheap answer. Maybe what you're
looking for. I want to get involved in one of your projects, or I wanted to get involved in a project that I heard about or found online and I saw it. Are there easier places to start?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you want to work on an existing project and to sort of learn, how does real software get written? Like you're a student and you want to work with somebody who's experienced. You want to make a real contribution to some piece of software that you use or that a lot of other people use. A great way to get started is if you just go to GitHub and you try to find some projects that are interesting to you. Maybe you look at something that you're already using today, something like the web framework that you're using or whatever you're using to get your job done today. A lot of that's already open source. So you can go to the GitHub page for one of these projects and you can just look at the list of issues that are open. And there's a lot of issues that are open on a lot of these projects. And an issue is just literally like either a bug that someone has reported, or it could be a request for a new feature. You can just look through these and see what are the problems or opportunity areas that I could maybe make a difference in. If you find something that looks like, you could do it, you can leave a comment on there and say, hey, I'm a student and I'm interested in making a contribution here. And is it cool if I work on this? Some projects, another good way to find stuff, some projects, they'll actually label their issues with good first contribution. You can look for a good first issue or a good first contribution, and you'll find stuff that's designed like it's supposed to be sort of relatively easy to do, and maybe a small bug or something that a student could do with very little context.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I know one of the projects that you're an author for is Webtorrent that you mentioned, and I want to fully understand it. So if you're going to describe Webtorrent, how would you try and explain that? Or if I really don't know, what's a torrent even? And I know it's we could have a whole nother discussion on that, but if you're going to try and explain, what's a torrent in 30 seconds, what does that mean?
So a torrent is just a file that you want to download. But instead of just normally when you're using the web, the way it normally works is your computer goes to a server and says, hey, server, give me this file, right? With a torrent, you say, hey, anyone in the world who has this file, please give me the file. That's the difference. So a torrent is a way of getting a file that you want from anyone in the world who already has that file by directly getting it from their computers. So they'll literally send you pieces of the file. So I could say, hey, everybody, I'm trying to get this file, and maybe 50 different people respond to me and say, hey, I have a piece of that. Here you go. And then your computer reassembles all those pieces, and now you've obtained the file much faster and much more resiliently because it came from so many different places that there wasn't one place where you had to go get it from, where it could be shut down or taken away, or the server could go away. It's very resilient.
How is the way WebTorrent works different than maybe how Torrents works in the past?
Yeah, so WebTorrent, the reason why I started the project was a realization that torrents are really powerful, but right now, in order to use them, you have to have a special piece of software installed on your computer called a BitTorrent client. So you have to go and have this special. It's like you can think of it like a web browser for torrents. You have to have a special program on your computer that knows how to go and get these files for you. And I realized that it would be much more powerful if you didn't need to have this special piece of software, and more people could use it if it was just like a website you could go to. So that's what WebTorrent is. It's just torrents on the web. Hence the name Webtorrent.
So simple. So it sounds like also you're currently a lecturer for a security class at Stanford. Is that right? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay. What's the name of the class you're teaching?
So I'm teaching CS 253 web security.
Okay. What are some of the things you'll teach people? What are some of the topics?
So in web security, we talk about all the things you need to do to write secure web programs. So that means programs that are safe against hackers, that are written in a way that the data of users is protected. So we're talking about, how to secure people's data safely, how to store users' passwords in a way that is correct. All the kinds of things that you need to know to make sure that your website can't be attacked by bad guys, basically. And there's actually a lot of things to know in that area. So an entire class dedicated to web security. We still didn't have time to hit all the topics that I wanted to hit. It's hard to fit all the topics into a 10-week class, just because there's so much in the web security world.
Yeah, and it feels like now more and more something's going to get hacked or there's going to be some ransomware thing all the time, every day, every week. It actually is happening to school districts now.
Yeah,
I
I've
don't know
heard
if you've
about that.
seen that, but there are school districts where they install some ransomware or something. I think it's something that, yeah, people should know.
The thing is, this is not inevitable. Like every time there's one of these ransomware attacks or there's a data breach and something gets stolen, that is the direct result of a programmer making a mistake every single time. Like if the software was written correctly, this would not be possible. So that tells you a lot about the state of programmer skill in the world. Like all these bugs are possible because we're making systems that are too complicated, that we can't understand, that have too many ways of falling apart, and where people maybe don't understand the implications of the code that they're writing. And so that's step one, is understanding security and thinking about it while you're writing code. You have to be thinking like an attacker while you're writing code so that you can make sure that you're safe against attackers.
That makes sense to me. So what would be something about coding or computer science that you would want a student to know who maybe is learning it? Maybe they're in their first class or second class, something that you would want them to know that they might not know, something interesting or surprising that you've discovered through all your experience.
Well, this is maybe something that programmers can forget over time while they're learning all these programming concepts, but you can get really far. You can accomplish a lot of really cool things by just sort of trying things out. You don't need to really like go and take a class on something and be really, well taught and like read a 500-page book about a topic before you can sort of jump in and just make your computer do really cool things. And that's one of the most exciting things about programming, is because everything is digital. If you're just interested in something, you can just do it on your computer. You can play with it, and there's no, you don't need a license to be a programmer, right? Anyone can be a programmer. You don't even have to go to school. Maybe I shouldn't be telling students that, but the truth is, like, it's not like being a doctor where you have to go to school for 8 years and go and get professionally certified. You can be a programmer by just being good at making programs, and then you are a programmer. Congratulations. There's no you don't have to get permission from anybody. So it's cool. It's really cool like that.
That is cool. I would love to know, just because you're working on a lot of different cutting edge technology with a lot of distributed systems or whatever it may be, is there anything in particular that you're excited about? Any technology, either something that you're working on or something that you see coming in the next year or a couple years, 5 years, any technology that you're involved with or know about that you'd be excited about?
Well, I've just been mostly thinking about security. So I'm really excited about the potential to just write better code and build tools that make it easier for people to do that. I think that's like going to be really big. Maybe blockchain will be really big, but
I think I think the blockchain and crypto stuff is so interesting. It seems like it's thematically related to a lot of the distributed type of systems work that you've done, but who knows?
Yeah. I don't know about a lot of the sort of people who are trying to get rich from it. I don't really think that stuff is going anywhere, but I think the ideas in cryptocurrency and in blockchains they're very thematically related to the peer-to-peer stuff I've been working on. And there's a lot of really interesting new primitives, new peer-to-peer concepts that have come out of that are really exciting. Maybe one other thing I'll say is I'm also really excited about, there's really good conversations happening right now in open source around how to make being an open source maintainer, which is what I am, into something that is sustainable, that can be actually a profession that you could do. In the future, I want kids in school to, when adults ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want people to say, I want to be an open source maintainer. I want that to be a viable option because it's super fun. It's super amazing. You get to travel the world. You get to meet so many people. You get to work on software that's downloaded millions or tens of millions of times. You get to have such an impact. You get to give away your work for free. The only thing is, right now, today, you really can't get paid doing it. And so that's why it's kind of a hard career path to go down. But if we could fix that, it would be really great.
I've seen some of the projects that you've done with it. I think it's interesting to see the different ways that open source can be structured and how it can be funded. And it seems like there's a lot of figuring out to do.
It's one of those things. It's like a public park or something where, we all get benefits from it, but it's important to think about how that actually gets paid for.
I know.
Right?
If you could like snap your fingers and change it so everything worked the way you wanted, how would that be? Would it be like companies, they all have to contribute into the open source pool, or is this an area you're still brainstorming on, or what directions are you most optimistic for open source funding?
So you said I could snap my fingers and I could do anything I want. So if I'm allowed to be, unrealistic, I would probably implement an open source tax on all companies that use software. So I would just collect a tax from everybody who uses it, because there is a cost every time somebody uses software, and starts filing issues. There is a cost the maintainer pays, and it is a thing that does make society generally better. So that would be a really good solution. Or maybe I would just charge everybody a cent for every download, instantly, and then bam, I would be retired in like 1 month.
There you go. Well, awesome. Yeah, so many cool projects, companies that you worked on. Really appreciate you taking time to join our podcast. If anyone wants to check out the work that you're doing online, where should they go?
They should go to feross.org. So that's FEROSS.org. That's my website.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Really appreciate it. And I have to learn a lot more about open source and security. So
also, thanks for all this stuff that you've been doing with CodeHS. I used it when I was tutoring somebody a little while ago, and it's really useful. It's really excellent work. So
hopefully we can get people learning a little bit, learn about open source, and have some people who want to become open source software developers in the future. So thanks again, Feross.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy.
Okay, that's a wrap for this week. Join us next time on the Coding in the Wild podcast, brought to you by CodeHS.